Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to explore a question that feels incredibly personal, yet profoundly universal. Who are you, really? It sounds simple, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually deceptively so. It opens up this whole world of complexity, hinting that identity isn't some fixed, singular thing we just have.
Right. Not static at all.
Exactly. It's more like a dynamic, multifaceted concept that's always, evolving and interacting with the world around us.
Constantly in flux.
So for this deep dive, we're taking you on a focused journey. We're looking at the cutting-edge insights from an expert handbook on identity theory and research.
A really comprehensive one.
Yeah, and we've specifically honed in on the epilogue. It's penned by leading scholars Seth J. Schwartz, Vivian L. Vignoles, and Kuhn Likes.
Heavy hitters in the field.
Definitely. Our mission today is basically to extract the most pivotal, forward-thinking ideas. Where is the field of identity studies actually headed? What are the exciting areas where different ideas are coming together?
Not just sitting side by side, but integrating.
Exactly, truly integrating. Now, if you're like our listener today, perhaps someone, say, with a background in elementary education who's gotten really curious about psychology.
Yeah.
Well, this deep dive is sort of custom tailored for you.
Yeah, connecting those dots.
Think of it as your express lane, maybe, to grasping some fundamental psychological concepts that are incredibly relevant to human development, interaction, especially in the vibrant, ever-changing environment of a classroom.
Absolutely critical for understanding kids.
We're going to be looking for those aha moments, and the practical connections you can actually apply to understanding children, communities.
Real takeaways.
Yeah. So let's begin our exploration. The sheer scope of identity research is just staggering. And what's particularly insightful is how these experts are trying to weave all these threads together.
Well, what truly stands out from the start, actually, is how the editors themselves openly admit they learned an incredible amount just from compiling this book.
Oh, wow. Even the experts.
Yeah. It really underscores the sheer richness, the diversity, and the ongoing evolution within this vast field. It's a powerful reminder that even the most established thinkers are continually learning, continually refining their understanding.
That's really humbling, isn't it?
It is. So our goal for this deep dive is to explore their vision for genuinely integrating these myriad insights. How can these seemingly disparate ideas be woven together into a more complete picture, rather than, forcing diverse perspectives into narrow, restrictive boxes?
Right, not simplifying it too much.
Exactly. They're advocating for a framework that genuinely creates space for the unique contributions from each perspective, seeing the whole forest, not just individual trees.
That's a powerful starting point.
Yeah.
Tells us, like you said, that even the top thinkers are embracing complexity, not shying away from it. And that openness leads us directly into our first major area of exploration. And this one fundamentally shifts our perspective.
Yeah.
The idea that identity isn't just about you as an isolated individual.
Exactly. To truly capture the richness of identity, we simply must move beyond looking at it through the narrow lens of isolated subdisciplines.
Like looking through just one people.
Right. The authors strongly advocate for developing integrative theoretical ideas and designing innovative research that captures multiple components and processes of identity simultaneously.
Okay, so studying different parts at once.
Yes. It's about understanding that identity isn't solely an internal personal construct that lives only inside one's head. It's much, much bigger than that.
And this leads us to something truly captivating. The first big challenge these scholars tackle is that identity isn't a one-level concept.
Right.
It's like peeling an onion, maybe, where each layer reveals something new about who we are and, crucially, how we fit into the broader world around us.
That's a great analogy.
It's about seeing how our individual identity connects deeply with our group identities and even with the broader societal contexts we inhabit.
Yeah, and a crucial question this raises is, how do we actually capture this complexity? How do we move past those isolated research areas?
Good question.
For instance, there's some brilliant work by researchers like Umanya Taylor. She illustrates how two prominent ways of thinking about identity, one focused on individual psychological development, like how you grow as a person.
Personal journey.
Right. And another focused on group membership. The social identity approach actually complement one another beautifully.
So they aren't opposing ideas.
Not at all. The first, that individual development approach, tends to focus on the internal processes of self-definition. How does a person develop their unique sense of self over time? The second, the social identity approach, focuses more on how our identity is shaped by the groups we belong to, the social categories we fit into.
Like being a fan of a certain team or part of a club.
Exactly. And when combined, these offer a much fuller understanding of complex dynamics, like ethnic identity, for example, than either perspective could on its own. They reveal how your personal journey of self-discovery is always playing out within the context of your community, your cultural heritage, your groups.
That makes so much sense.
Hmm.
It's like seeing both the unique internal map a person has of themselves, their personal story, and also the broader societal map that influences it, the landscape they're navigating.
Precisely.
The authors give a fantastic example of how this kind of integration can be practically useful. They look at identity in the workplace. It's not just about your job title, is it?
Oh, definitely not. On one hand, you have researchers like Skorkov and Vondracek. They explore what they call occupational identity at the level of the individual person.
Okay.
This is all about your personal aspirations, your self-definition within a career, thinking about questions like, who am I as a worker? Where am I going in my professional life?
So your personal career goals and how you see yourself professionally.
Right. It speaks to your personal sense of purpose, your skills, your long-term direction within your chosen field. It's that internal compass guiding your career journey.
And then quite differently, you have researchers like Haslam and Elmers. They approach the workplace. Well, they see it fundamentally as a context for group activity.
Okay, a different angle.
Yeah. Here, identity is shaped by the dynamics of the group itself, how leadership functions within a team, what motivates employees collectively, even how perceptions of stress are shared and managed within a team.
So less about me and more about us at work.
Exactly. It's less about your individual career aspirations and more about how your sense of self is tied to the collective experience, the shared goals of your work group. For instance, do you feel like a valued member of the marketing team or maybe kind of an outsider in the engineering department? That sort of thing.
I see. And the synergy between these two perspectives is absolutely crucial here. Integrating the personal career choices and aspirations and the workplace group dynamics and affiliations worlds is essential.
Why essential?
Well, it's essential for developing a complete and robust work identity. It also fosters effectiveness, both for the individual in their career journey and for the group in achieving its collective goals. You really can't fully understand one without considering the other.
Because they're always influencing each other.
Constantly, in subtle yet powerful ways.
Okay, so let's bring this home. What does this all mean for you, especially if you're deeply invested in elementary education? Imagine your classroom. It's like a micro-society, right?
Absolutely.
A student's identity isn't just, I'm good at drawing or I'm great at math. That's the individual inner world, their personal talent, their self-perception, their unique gifts.
Me.
Right. But that child's identity is also profoundly shaped by, I'm part of the blue team, or I'm the designated helper in our reading group, or even I sit at the quiet table. That's the group, the outer world.
The us in the classroom.
Exactly. Their role within the social structure of the classroom, their sense of belonging, and how they perceive their place in the collective.
Precisely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, understanding this multi-level nature means that as an educator, you're not just fostering individual learning outcomes. That's important, obviously.
Of course.
But you're also nurturing a child's sense of belonging within that classroom community. Think about it. How a child perceives themselves as a learner is influenced by their personal ability and interest, yes.
Definitely.
But also immensely by how their class as a whole, their small reading group, their table group performs and perceives them.
Oh, the group vibe really matters for the individual kid.
Hugely. For example, if a child struggles with reading, but their reading group consistently celebrates small victories and offers support, that child's individual identity as a learner will be buoyed, lifted up by the positive group identity.
Okay, so if a teacher intentionally encourages a positive group identity, maybe through collaborative projects where every child's contribution is valued, or team building stuff that emphasizes cooperation, that can significantly bolster an individual child's self-efficacy, their overall identity.
Absolutely. It's about creating an environment where both individual talents and collective belonging not only thrive, but they actually mutually reinforce each other.
Wow. So you're shaping not just individual minds, but also the social fabric, the atmosphere that wraps around those developing identities.
You really are. And the handbook highlights another powerful example of this multi-level view. It looks at the highly polarizing topic of international migration.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's complex.
It is, and they underscore how incredibly complex it is, far more nuanced than it's often portrayed in, public discourse.
That's certainly true. It often gets oversimplified.
Yeah.
So what does this multi-level identity perspective reveal about migration?
Well, the phenomenon of migration at its core is just comprised of so many intricate layers.
Like that onion again.
Exactly. On one level, you have the individual migrant's deeply personal inner experience, their hopes, their fears, their challenges, maybe longing for home, adapting to a new culture. That's their unique psychological journey.
Okay, the personal story.
Then you have the profound influence, and often the constraints posed by the migrant group itself, how shared culture, collective experiences of displacement or belonging, communal challenges, how all that influences individual choices and identity.
The community they're part of.
Right. And finally, you have the broader context of the receiving society's views and interactions with migrant groups. This can involve anything from official government policies to the everyday attitudes and perceptions of the host community.
So how people are treated by the wider society.
Yes. And what this demonstrates is how a migrant's sense of self, their group memberships, and their relations with others are profoundly affected by the dynamic interplay among all these various identity aspects and processes.
It's not just about one person moving.
No, it's a complex dance between individual narrative, group solidarity, and societal reception. It really complicates the picture in a necessary way.
This really, really highlights that identity is never, ever formed in a vacuum. Whether it's in a workplace or navigating a new country, or even just our daily elementary school classroom, it's always a dynamic interplay of personal experience and the external forces of groups and society, always interacting.
Always.
So we've painted this picture of identity with many layers: individual, group, societal. But here's where it gets even more fascinating, I think. These layers aren't static.
Yeah.
Our identity isn't some finished product. It's more like a living story we're constantly writing and rewriting. And it's shaped by both these fleeting moments and these long-term developments.
What's particularly insightful here, and really a key point in the epilogue, is the idea that minute by minute, hour by hour, and day by day transactions, these serve as the crucial building blocks for longer-term developmental trajectories of identity.
Building blocks, like Lego bricks.
Kind of. Think of it like a river, maybe. The overall course is long-term, right?
Yeah.
But it's shaped by every single pebble moved, every drop of water flowing in the moment.
Okay, I like that.
This perspective directly connects those seemingly short-term, everyday processes with the grander overall life story. It's about how seemingly small, momentary interactions accumulate to shape who we become over months, years, and ultimately a lifetime.
So when we talk about these short-term processes, these building blocks, what kinds of daily moments are we actually looking at here? Can you give some examples?
Absolutely. We're looking at concepts like contextual shifts in identity salience.
Okay, what's that?
It's basically how different aspects of our identity become more prominent depending on the situation we're in.
Oh, okay.
For example, you might be very aware of being a student when you're in class, taking notes, answering questions. But then the bell rings, you go out to the playground, and you immediately shift gears. You become intensely aware of being a friend.
Right, different roles kick in.
Exactly. Different behaviors, social rules, different aspects of your personality come to the forefront. Or another example, consider how we self-position ourselves in conversations.
How we talk about ourselves.
Yeah, through the stories we tell about ourselves, the way we respond to others, we are constantly defining and redefining who we are in that specific moment, in that interaction.
And what about when our sense of self is challenged? Does that fit in here?
Yes, precisely. Another short-term process is how we defend against threats to our self-esteem.
Protecting ourselves.
Right. When our self-concept is challenged perhaps by a critique or a difficult situation, a failure, we have these immediate reactions to protect that sense of self. These are all fleeting moments maybe, but they are incredibly potent in shaping our identity over time.
So these aren't just fleeting moments like a passing thought that disappears. You're saying they actually add up. It's not just one big event that defines us, but the small cumulative experiences.
Absolutely. These short-term transactions bring about subtle, incremental changes in identity exploration or commitment that truly add up over months or years. This is a key insight from identity researchers who study these developmental processes. And ultimately, these continuous incremental changes contribute to how individuals construct their overall life story.
Their personal narrative.
Exactly. The way time is conceptualized within identity studies allows for this beautiful integration of perspectives that focus on different timescales. It shows how daily experiences are meticulously woven into the very fabric of our long-term self.
Like building a large, complex structure, brick by brick, day by day.
That's a perfect way to put it.
That makes so much more sense now.
Yeah.
It's not just the grand life events, graduating, starting a new job, getting married that define us. It's the everyday moments, a casual conversation, a small success, a minor setback, a moment of connection that truly shape who we become over time.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, especially for someone like you in elementary education, this is incredibly powerful and, frankly, a profound responsibility.
How so?
Think about a student in your class. Every time they successfully solve a math problem, every time they receive a word of encouragement from you for their effort, not just the answer, or have a positive interaction with a peer during a group activity. That's a short-term transaction.
A little brick.
Exactly. These are not just isolated incidents. They're moments that contribute brick by brick to that child's evolving identity.
So, if I understand correctly, each of those small moments, those building blocks, contribute to that child's long-term identity as a learner, or even as a math person or a kind friend.
Yes.
So, a child who consistently feels capable and supported in math, say, through these daily positive transactions, getting a tricky problem right, receiving praise for perseverance, maybe helping a classmate understand something, they'll likely develop a strong, positive math learner identity over the school year. And that's far more impactful and lasting than just one test score. Is that the kind of cumulative effect you mean?
Precisely. That's exactly it. And conversely, consistent negative experiences, repeated struggles without adequate support, constant criticism, feeling isolated during group work, these can also build a long-term self-concept that is, well, less positive.
Right. That makes sense too, unfortunately.
Understanding this emphasizes the profound cumulative impact of daily classroom interactions on a child's evolving sense of self, their academic identities, and their broader life story as a student. It truly highlights the significance of every single day, every single interaction in the classroom.
Wow.
You are quite literally helping them write their story.
That's a profound thought for anyone in education. The idea that every interaction, every word, every choice in how we structure learning is a brushstroke on the canvas of a child's developing identity. It brings incredible weight and purpose to the daily work.
It really does.
And this brings us to something truly captivating. This takes us to a timeless question. Philosophers, psychologists, they've grappled with this for centuries. Is who you are already inside you, just waiting to be found? Or do you build it piece by piece through your experiences, your interactions?
Ah, the big one.
Yeah, it's the classic nature versus nurture debate, but applied at the very core of our being, our sense of self.
This raises an important question that a significant part of this handbook directly addresses. Is identity primarily discovered, personally constructed, or socially constructed?
Okay, those three options.
Yeah. And as you'll quickly see, the answer, like with many complex psychological phenomena, is, well, it's nuanced. It rarely fits neatly into just one category.
It's usually a mix, isn't it?
Pretty much. Some perspectives lean towards identity being something we discover, uncovering our true selves. Think of it like finding a hidden treasure within you.
So like a child discovering they have this natural talent for music, and that talent feels like a part of their core self that was always there, just waiting to be expressed.
Exactly that kind of feeling. Then you have perspectives that emphasize the individual's active role in constructing their identity, shaping it through their choices, their interpretations, the meaning they make of their experiences.
More like building a house, maybe, brick by brick, according to your own blueprint.
That's a good way to think about it. And finally, there are views that highlight how identity is socially constructed, profoundly shaped by our interactions with others, the language we use, the cultural contexts we inhabit.
Okay, so that's more like a community building a shared landmark.
Yeah.
It's a collective effort, influenced by shared stories and symbols.
Another great analogy, yes. It emphasizes the we in shaping the me.
So how do researchers even go about trying to figure out which of these forces are at play, or how they all fit together? It sounds like a really tricky thing to study, especially that idea of discovering a true self. How can you study something that's supposedly already there?
It is tricky, absolutely. And the authors express some thoughtful skepticism about relying solely on individual self-reports when it comes to true self-discovery.
Why skepticism?
Well, they point out a subtle but critical distinction. People might not be able to objectively tell if the true self they are experiencing actually existed prior to its discovery, or if they are, in reality, just experiencing a very strong sense of fit and authenticity with a self they have perhaps unknowingly, constructed over time.
Ah, so it feels like discovery, even if it's really a perfect fit they've built.
Exactly. It can feel like discovery, even if it's a profound sense of fit with something constructed. The feeling is real, but the origin is debatable.
That's a fascinating point. So a person might feel like they've unearthed something that was always there, but from a research perspective, it could be that their experiences have simply led them to build a self that feels incredibly authentic and right.
Precisely. So to address this empirically, you need innovative methodologies.
Like what?
For instance, imagine using experimental methods, similar to those often employed in social psychology. You could randomly assign participants to conditions where they receive descriptions of themselves, descriptions they are encouraged to believe are true or authentic, when in fact these descriptions are biased or even completely random.
Oh, interesting.
If such a manipulation successfully prompts individuals to report feelings of self-discovery, it would suggest that people's experiences of a true self can, at least sometimes, be personally or socially constructed. It highlights that our powerful sense of authenticity can, surprisingly, be influenced by external input.
That's a really clever way to test that idea. Wow. It really pulls back the curtain on how those deep feelings of self-recognition might actually form. It makes you wonder what parts of my true self were truly discovered versus built.
Exactly. It prompts that reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, qualitative and narrative studies can provide invaluable insights into how people experience these processes in their own words.
Talking to people directly.
Yes. Researchers could utilize structured interview methods, asking questions like, how did you come to know who you are? Or, do you feel that you have discovered who you really are? And if so, how did you do this? This allows individuals to describe their personal self-construction and self-discovery journeys.
In their own terms.
Right. Helping us understand the subjective reality of these processes from the individual's unique point of view without imposing external categories.
And this whole discovery versus construction idea, it isn't just an abstract debate among academics, is it? You mentioned it ties into a much bigger discussion in sociology.
That's right.
Structure agency. It's about how much of what we do in life, how much of who we become is truly our own free choice and deliberate action. That's the agency part. And how much is shaped and constrained by the world around us. The societal structures, the expectations, the opportunities available to us. That's the structure part.
That connection is absolutely brilliant.
Yep.
And it's beautifully illustrated by the concept of commitment.
Commitment, how so?
Interestingly, commitment means slightly different things in different identity theories. Yet on closer inspection, it shares a lot of common ground. For example, within one prominent approach to identity development, commitment is typically understood as an individual's conscious internal decision to adhere to a specific set of goals, values, and beliefs.
So, my decision to commit.
Right. It's about making a deliberate choice and dedicating yourself to it, like committing to become a doctor or committing to uphold a particular moral code. It's a very agentic, personal act.
Okay. And what about the other side of that coin? How does commitment look from a more structural perspective?
Well, seemingly in contrast, within another major sociological perspective, symbolic interactionism commitment refers more to a person's occupying a specific social structural position, a position that tends to prescribe certain identities and behaviors while prescribing others.
So less about my choice, more about the role I'm in.
Kind of. Think of it less as a personal decision and more as the role you inhabit within a social system. For instance, when you become a teacher, you commit to that role. And it comes with predefined expectations for how you should behave, what responsibilities you have, how you should present yourself. This isn't just a personal choice. It's a social position with inherent constraints and guidelines.
Okay, so at first glance, they sound like two totally different things, even though they use the same word, commitment. One is about internal choice, the other about external role.
How do these scholars argue they're actually connected? They seem quite different.
This is where the integration becomes truly fascinating. While seemingly distinct, they aren't mutually exclusive. A personal commitment, that internal, conscious decision to dedicate oneself, might very well be influenced, even subtly, by social contextual pressures or opportunities.
Oh, okay.
For example, a young person might commit to a specific career path, partly because it's highly valued and accessible in their family or community, not purely out of individual passion alone. That's structure influencing agency, right? Right, and I can see how it works the other way too. My choices might influence the structures I find myself in. Like choosing a job puts me in that role.
Exactly. From the structural perspective, a person may willingly enter into a social structural position of commitment, deciding to take a new job, choosing to get married. These are acts of personal agency, your choice.
Yeah.
But these choices then place you in a new structural role that comes with certain identities and behaviors that are externally influenced. These can be viewed, in a sense, as the behavioral component of a personally endorsed commitment.
So the difference is often just one of emphasis.
Pretty much. It demonstrates that personal agency operates within the bounds of structural constraints, while also, at least to some extent, helping to determine the structural positions individuals find themselves in. It's a dynamic two-way street. Structure shapes agency. Agency shapes structure.
That's a really powerful idea, that our choices shape our structures, and our structures then influence our choices and possibilities. So where does this leave us for future research in this complex area? What more needs to be understood?
Well, a critical direction for future work is to fully integrate these agency-based approaches with role-based perspectives. Researchers need to explore in greater depth how personal and social processes of identity construction interact in real-world settings.
Getting out into the real world.
Yes. For instance, scholars have suggested that contextual factors like a person's socioeconomic status, their cultural background, even the opportunities available in their local community significantly constrain the potential identity alternatives a person can even consider, let alone select.
So it's not just about what you choose to be. It's also profoundly about what options are even presented to you by your environment. What's even on the menu?
Exactly. What's even on the menu? It's not an infinite buffet of choices for everyone.
That makes perfect sense. You can't just ask someone what their identity is. You have to see how their environment shapes the very possibilities they have to consider for themselves. How would researchers even study that in a practical sense? Seems difficult.
It is, but it's crucial. To truly understand this, we need to employ methods like ethnographic methodologies, which involve immersive, long-term observation of people in their natural settings, truly living among them.
Really getting in deep.
Right. As well as multi-level studies that simultaneously examine both individual experiences and broader contextual variables. These approaches can uncover the subtle, often unspoken ways in which contextual processes promote or inhibit the range of identity elements and positions from which one can choose. It's about seeing the grand narrative of society interacting with the individual story.
And there's another fascinating concept mentioned here, this idea that individuals are producers of their own development. What does that mean in the context of identity?
It suggests that the commitments individuals intentionally enact, like deciding to get married or choosing to become a parent or starting a new business, these acts of agency can subsequently become structural roles that they inhabit. And these roles then, in turn, can surprisingly constrain future identity choices. For example, deciding to become a parent is an agentic choice, but that role then might make certain career moves that require a great deal of flexibility and traveling less feasible, constraining future agency.
So your past choices create structures that limit future choices.
In some ways, yes. It highlights the intricate interplay between explicit and implicit commitments and truly requires interdisciplinary cross-perspective work to fully examine how our intentional choices can create structures that then shape our future selves.
Okay, let's connect this back to the classroom again. This discovery versus construction, agency versus structure. How does it play out there?
Well, think about a child who discovers they love science, maybe after a really fun hands-on experiment where they feel that undeniable spark of excitement, that natural curiosity.
That feels like individual discovery.
It does, but their identity as a scientist is also actively constructed socially. Through the teacher encouraging their questions, their peers recognizing their interest when they ask good questions or lead a lab activity, and simply having access to exciting science materials and projects in the classroom. The initial discovery might feel individual, but the construction of that identity as a scientist is a deeply communal effort.
Agency meets structure again.
Exactly. And consider how children commit to being a good student. From that individual-focused neo-Ericksonian view, it's their personal decision to value learning, to apply themselves, to strive for understanding, to do their homework. That's agency.
Their choice to try hard.
Right. But from a social role perspective, a symbolic interactionist view, it's about occupying the student role, which comes with certain clear expectations. Raise your hand, complete homework, follow classroom rules, collaborate respectfully. That's structure.
The rules of the game in the classroom.
Precisely. A teacher's role, then, is to ingeniously create a classroom structure where students can both discover their unique talents, agency, and willingly construct their positive identities within the classroom's social framework. Structure.
So understanding this interplay means recognizing that you, as a teacher, are not just presenting facts. You are creating an environment where children can explore their inner passions, their agency, and also willingly step into valuable roles within the community, the structure.
Mm-hmm.
So if you establish clear routines and group roles, structure, but also provide lots of opportunities for personal expression and choice, agency, you're helping children develop a robust, integrated sense of self. Both parts are needed.
Precisely. Understanding this interplay helps teachers see how their classroom environment, their rules, their daily interactions are constantly shaping the identities of their students. They're offering both choices and constraints that profoundly influence who those students become as learners and as people.
It really is about creating that optimal space for self-discovery and
This
self-construction.
is the goal.
It truly gives a teacher so much more power and profound responsibility when you think of it that way. Every decision in the classroom, from seating arrangements to how you give feedback, it can be an identity-shaping moment.
Every single one.
All right, let's dive into our final area. If identity is this incredibly complex, multi-layered, dynamic concept, how do researchers even begin to study it effectively? Seems like a huge challenge.
It is.
The experts in this handbook point to a crucial direction for the field, using multiple methodologies, not just sticking to one approach.
Right.
They're advocating for a diverse toolkit, more holistic approach to understanding this complexity.
And what's particularly insightful here is the call for the combined integrated use of qualitative and quantitative methods.
Qual and quant together.
Exactly. Now, this isn't a brand new idea in social science. I mean, it's been advocated for by many researchers for decades. But such truly mixed method research in identity studies remains relatively scarce.
Really? Why that?
Well, it's challenging, requires different skill sets, but it offers tremendous gains. The power, as you mentioned, comes from the synergy between these seemingly different approaches.
Okay, so for someone who might not be deep into research methods, what exactly are the benefits of bringing together, say, in-depth interviews with large-scale surveys? How do they truly complement each other to give us a better picture?
Well, the synergy is profound because each method compensates for the other's weaknesses while leveraging its strengths. Qualitative research methods like in-depth interviews, ethnographic observations, detailed case studies is excellent for exploring complex phenomena, generating rich, nuanced understanding.
Getting the deep story.
Right. It allows researchers to delve deep into individual experiences, understand motivations, uncover unexpected themes, grasp the why behind behavior.
Yeah.
Quantitative research, on the other hand, using surveys, experiments, statistical analysis, can then rigorously test the hypotheses that emerge from that qualitative work across larger populations. It can establish patterns, precisely measure relationships between variables.
So testing the story on a bigger scale, getting the what and how much.
Exactly. The authors even describe a kind of circular movement in research. Deep qualitative insights can lead to precise, testable hypotheses for quantitative study.
Okay.
Then, further qualitative analyses can be conducted to explore any surprising or unexplained results that emerge from the quantitative data, adding richness and contextual meaning back to the numbers.
So they feed each other back and forth.
It's an iterative back-and-forth process that continually builds a more complete and robust picture. Admittedly, true mixed methods research is difficult. It requires diverse training and skills you need to understand inferential statistics for quantitative analysis and master in-depth interview techniques for qualitative.
Takes a lot of expertise.
It does, but the payoff in terms of comprehensive understanding is undeniably significant.
That makes perfect sense. It's like using a microscope to see the fine details of individual experiences and then using a wide-angle lens or maybe a satellite image to see the broad landscape of patterns across many people.
That's a great way to put it.
You truly need both to get the full picture. And they provide a compelling example of this in action, don't they? Involving national identity and, interestingly, anti-immigrant prejudice.
Yes, it's a really compelling illustration from a study by Pearson, Vignoles, and Brown. This research started from a profound qualitative theoretical idea rooted in critical discourse theory.
Okay, critical discourse theory sounds academic. What's the gist?
Simply put, it's the idea that the dominant ways a society talks about things, its pervasive stories, its shared assumptions, its unspoken rules about who belongs and who doesn't, can actually make certain identity positions easier to occupy and others less so.
So, like the background music of a culture, as you said earlier, it sets the tone for everything, subtly influencing how people think and feel.
Precisely. In this specific study, it was about how the prevalent ways a nation defines itself, its discursive climate, you could call it, its dominant narrative, could influence how easy it is for individuals to be strongly identified with their nation while simultaneously holding positive attitudes toward immigrants.
Ah, okay. So does the national story naturally include newcomers, or does it tend to exclude them,
Yeah,
that kind of thing?
exactly. Does it create a tension between us and them, or does it allow for both?
So how do they test this big abstract idea about national narratives and feelings towards immigrants with actual data? How
Yeah.
do they bring numbers into something that sounds so qualitative?
Well, they conducted a large-scale quantitative analysis. They used survey data from 31 different nations to test this prediction.
Wow, 31 nations.
Yeah, and what they found provided strong support for their initial qualitative theory. Specifically, in nations where national membership was defined to a greater extent in terms of shared language meaning, the prevailing discourse was that you're truly part of the nation if you speak the language.
Good.
They found a correlation. Stronger national identification was linked to more negative attitudes toward immigrants.
So the way the nation defined itself made it harder to feel both patriotic and welcoming.
Essentially, yes. The prevailing discursive climate in those countries seemed to make it easier to identify strongly with the nation or have positive attitudes toward immigrants, but harder to do both at the same time. It created a kind of psychological tension.
That's incredible. It shows how these big abstract ideas we have as a society about what makes a country can actually shape individual attitudes. And you can use numbers, survey data from 31 nations to show evidence for something that started as a theory about language and culture. So if your country defines itself primarily by language, it might be psychologically harder for people to simultaneously embrace their national identity and welcome newcomers. It creates a conflict within the identity.
That's what the data suggested. And in striking contrast, in nations where national membership was primarily defined in terms of shared citizenship, implying that anyone who is a citizen belongs, regardless of their native language or background.
Okay, a different definition of belonging.
Right. In those nations, no such negative correlation was found. The discursive climate there made it easier for people to identify strongly with the nation and yet also express positive attitudes toward immigrants.
Fascinating.
This study, alongside other examples in the handbook, powerfully illustrates how qualitative and quantitative approaches can be used together to develop and test broader, more sophisticated theoretical ideas. This is how we achieve the best of both worlds.
Drawing on the strengths of both.
Exactly, compensating for the weaknesses of both methodological approaches, leading to much deeper, more robust insights.
Okay, let's bring this home one last time. For someone like you, working in elementary education, how does this mixed methods idea translate?
Well, think about your role in understanding your students' identities and their learning journeys. You might naturally conduct qualitative observations all the time.
Like watching kids play, listening to them talk.
Exactly. Listening closely to how students talk about themselves in group work, reading their journal entries to understand their self-perceptions as a learner, their struggles, their passions. You're gathering rich, detailed, qualitative insights into their inner worlds.
Okay, that makes sense. That's the qualitative part.
And this qualitative data can then inform a quantitative approach, even a simple one, in your classroom. For example, you could then use a simple quantitative method. Maybe a brief anonymous survey about how comfortable they feel participating in different subjects. Math, reading, art, science.
Getting some numbers on feelings.
Right. If you find, for example, that certain groups of students, maybe girls, maybe students from a particular background, consistently report feeling less comfortable in math, despite seemingly good grades.
Okay.
You could then go back to qualitative conversations, individual check-ins, small group discussions, even just observing their body language more closely during math lessons to understand why.
Digging deeper into the why behind the numbers.
Precisely. What specific interactions, beliefs, or past experiences are shaping that particular identity as a math person or not a math person? The numbers show you what, the qualitative helps you understand why.
So what does this all mean in practice for you as an educator? This combined approach allows you to achieve that best of both worlds right there in your classroom. You gain deep, nuanced insights into individual experiences while also identifying broader patterns within your classroom or school community. It helps you avoid making assumptions, allows you to tailor your support for student identity development much more effectively.
Absolutely.
You move beyond just observing to truly understanding and then hopefully intentionally influencing in a positive way.
Precisely. It allows you to move beyond surface-level observations to truly understand the complex interplay of factors shaping a child's identity. And that ultimately empowers you to create more targeted and impactful interventions, more supportive environments. You're not just teaching subjects, you're nurturing identities.
Wow. Well, we've certainly journeyed through some incredibly rich and complex terrain today, exploring the cutting edge of identity theory.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We started by understanding identity as this multi-level construct, recognizing it's not just about the individual, but also the groups we belong to, the broader societal context shaping us.
The layers.
Then we delved into its dynamic nature, seeing how those seemingly small, short-term, daily interactions act as powerful building blocks for our long-term sense of self, our evolving life story.
The bricks adding up.
And we wrestled with that fascinating, almost philosophical question, is identity discovered or constructed? Ultimately, understanding it's often a nuanced, beautiful interplay between the two. Agency and structure working together.
That dynamic dance.
Finally, we looked at how researchers are embracing multiple methodologies, combining that qualitative depth with quantitative breadth to gain a truly comprehensive understanding. The Handbook, and our deep dive today, really champion an integrative approach,
Bringing it all together.
pushing us to see how all these dimensions fit together to create the whole person, the relationship, the group, even the society itself. This deep dive, hopefully, clarified conceptions of identity beyond just a simple who you are. It shows how these various dimensions are intricately connected, creating the complex fabric of who we are, moment by moment, day by day, layer by layer. So, what does this all mean for you, especially in your journey in elementary education?
Yeah, that's the takeaway.
Considering how deeply identity is shaped by layers, by minute interactions, by subtle daily moments, the overall climate of a classroom, what conscious or unconscious building blocks are you contributing to the identities of the young learners you interact with every single day?
It's a powerful question.
And how can this new integrated understanding help you foster their positive sense of self, both as unique individuals and as vital parts of a group in the most powerful ways imaginable?
Which leads to that final important question for reflection. How might understanding these integrated perspectives on identity influence your approach? Your approach to creating an even more inclusive, supportive, and truly empowering learning environment. An environment where every child feels not only seen and valued, but genuinely empowered to explore and actively construct their unique place in the world, both as an individual learner and as a contributing member of their classroom community. What small, intentional changes might you make tomorrow to nurture those evolving identities?